Right. Welcome to the ARLnow Podcast. I'm Lena. I am here with Dan and Vernon again this week. How was your weekend?
Well, it was a whole week for me. I'm back from
Yeah.
my vacation and, kind of still wishing I was on my vacation, but here we are.
That sounds awesome. Where were you, Dan?
I
Madrid?
was in Spain. This is not a knock against ARLnow or anybody. It was a very, very nice vacation. I was just living the
Wait,
good
you
life over there.
you mean you weren't excited to come back to Arlington, Virginia after being in Spain for a week?
Well, I mean, it's paradise here as well. Just need to get back to the highlights here too.
Yeah, mine was I was not in Madrid. I did an escape room in DC. That was pretty fun. And honestly, mostly I've just been playing the new Doom game. So pretty hyped about that, to be honest. That's been the biggest part of my weekend.
Yeah, that sounds like a good way to spend a weekend, both of you. All right, should we just get into it?
Yeah,
Get it started? All right.
nice.
Our first story, Arlington Animal Rescue puts fired feds to work fostering pets. So I love this. Vernon, this one's your story. You want to tell us about it?
Yeah, this is the Lucky Dog Animal Rescue. It is a regional nonprofit, and the cool thing that they don't run a shelter or anything. Their whole gist is they pair people who want to take care of animals with foster animals in need. It's a pretty fun system. They're a very active local nonprofit for that, and they've been having a big push recently to connect people who were fired from their federal jobs recently. That's a lot of people in this region, in case you haven't been following the news, and they're trying to connect them with foster pets in need. They launched a new part of their program that means that they're providing all kinds of supplies and stuff for those federal workers. So, anything you need to take care of a pet, that's toys, food, bowls, everything. So it's really cool.
Yeah. No, I think this is really awesome, especially because as a, laid off employee, it's, a financial burden having a pet. So that would probably be kind of deterring them from adopting, fostering, anything like that, even if they really wanted that. So it's awesome. They get something to work with, keep them company. I know that would make me feel better.
I was really worried where you were going with that. You started off with as a laid off employee, and I was like, wait, what? This is breaking news. Yeah. It's like,
Not me
uh-oh.
personally, at least not that
Yeah,
I know of.
yeah.
I am here doing this, so.
Thanks for keeping us in our job, Scott.
It does seem like a really cool program, though. I mean, I can definitely say, I got my dog, and there's some mornings where he's the one who's like, he's just happy to see me and brings the energy. And I feel like if I were, out of work, here in the DC area, just kind of watching the bad news roll in after I lost my job, might need a little bit of company around the house.
Yeah,
Oh
and
yeah,
it also gives you so much time to do training, all of that kind of stuff too. So you have something to like, with my two dogs, the training was my favorite part of it, but it's definitely time consuming. So
yeah,
if you've got a 40-hour a week job, it can be a lot to do in addition. So
yeah.
I think the
My
dogs are going to be better off for this too.
Yeah, my first rabbit was a foster failure. I was supposed to just foster him for like a month, and then when I brought him back to the shelter, apparently he got very depressed and wouldn't eat anything, and I was at home very depressed, and I finally called the shelter and was like in tears, being like, "Could I adopt him?" And we were together for years after that. So it's a good program.
Yeah. My husband won't let us foster dogs because we would have 15 dogs in the house if that was the case, because I would not want to get rid of any of them.
Yeah, I think we were talking about this in the newsroom actually when this came up. It's a really hard situation. I don't know how people do that as a foster, because you both get attached to
Yeah.
these animals. Like, you stay with it, they're your pets, you form that bond, but you have to, at the end of the day, be aware that like you are going to be handing these off to somebody else. It's kind of a
Mhm.
weird relationship, but kudos to the people who can do that.
Yeah, no, it's an amazing thing. Props to them. All right. Very, very different story coming up. This one is county leaders plan to end police Section 7 interactions with ICE. Yeah, a little bit of a 180 here. Moving on with this story.
Yeah, this is a pretty big deal. So what this means is that I think we've talked about it here on the podcast before. voluntary cooperation with ICE here in Arlington. So activists have been pushing for years at this point to have our police end all voluntary cooperation with immigration enforcement. And it happened while I was on vacation, but I had people texting me about it. This is a very big deal here in Arlington. And, basically what our county leaders are saying is that the circumstances have changed, since Trump has taken office. The way that immigration enforcement is being handled, the way that detainees are being treated these days is just, at least in the view of our county leaders, has changed the calculus. Now that's not the case for everybody. We're taking some heat from our governor now, and I don't know what the kind of response from the public as a whole here in the county has been. Certainly, the activists are happy. The fallout from this, I think, remains to be seen.
Yeah, I know. I think it was just 2 or 3 weeks ago, we were having this conversation about how they had been increasing that. And so this is such a stark change in seemingly a short amount of time. So
Mm-hmm.
it's pretty crazy.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's a
I think
pretty major. I was just
that's
gonna say
public
it's
pressure, right?
yeah, a pretty major policy shift. Yeah, a
Mhm.
lot of public pressure has been
Yeah.
put on this. And it is interesting. It's this is something that the activists have been pushing for literally for years.
Yeah.
So they're certainly see it as a pretty big win. What happens next? Like I say, we're gonna see, because certainly the governor is not at all happy about this.
Yeah, but I mean, he's not going to be in office too much longer, one way or the other. We're going to be getting a new governor in. Depending on the results of that election, I think could kind of shape how this goes forward. I mean, polls are leaning pretty heavily towards the Democrat right now, so we'll see.
Yeah. I mean, I know that in the past, possibly one point of hesitation for county leaders has been, not wanting to poke the bear, whether it's Youngkin, whether it's Trump. I'm not sure. I haven't seen anything about, word of this getting up to the federal level. Certainly, Trump has been focusing more on immigration enforcement here in the DC area, or at least bringing more visibility toward that. So, unclear what it would mean there, but I haven't heard any word from, the Trump administration having anything to say about this so far.
This could also be a push for, other communities to start doing the same thing, though. Give a little bit of pushback as opposed to, so we'll see, it could make genuine changes.
Oh yeah, my immediate follow-up here is going to be, like, as soon as we're done, getting on the phone with Fairfax or telling the Alexandria people to,
Mhm.
like, contact Alexandria, see what their relationship is like, because I could definitely see this
Yeah.
this is one thing a lot of people say, I don't know what we can do locally, these are all federal issues, and this is exactly one of those, like, local things that local governments can do if they're so inclined.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I think this is a great show of that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what folks, within the police department think about this, certainly. There were already very limited circumstances in which our police could contact immigration enforcement. What I've been hearing from police is that this is a major part of how they combat gang activity, for instance. Most of these cases that they were dealing with were alleged gang members, which, the cases were getting forward to immigration enforcement. That's part of how we were handling this. So what does this mean for public safety and, the Arlington County Police Department's overall approach to these kinds of cases? I think those are some important follow-up questions.
Yeah, no, 100%. All right, moving on. Another more serious story. Point in time count shows homeless in Arlington continues to rise. Vernon, this is another one of yours.
Yeah, we were looking at homelessness numbers released this week from the Metropolitan Council of Governments. They do their annual point in time count. That means that this is not like a formal, big, annual data-driven survey. They go out around the localities and basically count the number of homeless people they can see in shelters, on the street, stuff like that. So it's a fairly informal count, but people do use it as an indicator of what those statistics are like in Arlington and around the region. Interestingly, Arlington's has continued to increase every year. It's one of the only localities in the region where that's risen substantially over time. Over the last year, it went from 243 people that they saw to 271. Over the last, I believe, 5 years, it's risen by 58%. So since the end of COVID, really, I mean, back in 2021, that's increased every single year. It's been going up.
I think that's in part because of DC's like crackdown, and they're kind of forcing all of them out of where they might be. And Arlington, if you're unhoused, there's not really a whole lot of options for places that you can go. So it could
Yeah,
be,
I definitely think that plays a part in it, kind of pushing people around the region. Localities that are,
yeah.
hesitant to offer services are doing more to incentivize people to leave their areas, which is, a questionable way of handling this. One of the explanations I saw from the survey, they do reports on each of the individual regions, and they said the increase is driven in large part by sheltered homelessness. That means that the good part here is that Arlington has more shelter space available for homeless people to stay in. So that might be why the visible count is increasing. But they also said some of that could be increases in the cost of living, housing costs, stuff like that. Although that's a regional problem, so I don't really see that as an Arlington specific one. So there's a lot of factors going into this.
Yeah.
I mean, I know obviously housing is a huge topic in this area. Did the report have anything to say about what it would take to start bringing these numbers down?
Yeah, it didn't say specifically in terms of numbers of how much housing is needed, but it did say that you cannot combat homelessness without giving additional resources for permanent housing, employment services, and rental assistance. That was the other big part of this that it was bringing up several times throughout this report, is rental assistance can be a huge way of keeping people in their place if they're going through a temporary crisis. Because it is a lot harder to, once somebody starts being homeless, it's a lot harder to get them back into a house than it is to pay for somebody to just stay in their apartment for maybe a few months until they find another job.
Yeah, I know a lot of housing advocates, they talk about, like, we need more housing of every kind in order to start bringing down the cost of living here. But I look at the prices, of these new apartments that are getting built, and certainly somebody coming out of homelessness isn't going to be able to afford, a unit in one of these houses that are getting built. Can you, like, talk a little bit more about
Yeah.
what... Yeah.
Well, another wrinkle in that is that they've seen an increase in family homelessness. So what we're talking about is not just, single apartments that you need, but you need apartments with multiple bedrooms, apartments to house, like, not only parents, but also children in them, because that's what we've seen an increase there. It's not just, single guys out on the street. Not that it's ever good or should be allowed by society, but, the fact of the matter here is that those people are easier to put into of single occupancy units. And when they do build affordable housing for a lot of these developments, when they have to, if you give them a certain bonus on density, they have to build affordable units. But they usually try to build single units if they can, because that's cheaper for them. You can put one, maybe two unhoused persons into those units, and you don't have to pay for everything that you would for a multifamily unit. But multifamily units are really what we need in terms of regional affordable housing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see if maybe this pushes them to take that more seriously and really put more thought into that kind of housing, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, some of the issues here, like, I know a lot of localities. I've mostly covered this for Alexandria, where for years, I mean, since I started covering Alexandria, one of my first meetings was with their affordable housing division within government. And they care about this a lot. Like, this is something that they are paying serious attention to, but they are just struggling to keep pace with the demand. Partially, it's because the other reason that you need so much affordable housing is there used to be what's called market rate affordable housing. There's two kinds of, we're getting on a real tangent here. There's two kinds of housing. There's committed affordable housing and there's market rate housing. And the market rate housing, that means stuff that you aren't set aside by government. That's just stuff where you can afford it, like with regular salaries and stuff like that. That has nosedived over the last few years. So the demand is not just the demand is going up, it's also that the supply of market rate housing is decreasing exponentially. And there's a real struggle to keep pace with that for committed affordable units.
Not to belabor, this one story, but, obviously housing is super complicated. The other factor that this makes me think about is other reasons that people might end up unhoused, which aren't necessarily directly related to the cost of housing, but, like, fleeing domestic violence, for instance, which I know has gone up in recent years in Arlington. It's not at all uncommon for people to end up on the streets simply because they have nowhere else to go. I gotta wonder what can be done or what is being done to address that more.
They actually noted that specifically in the Montgomery County section. I didn't dive too much into that one because it's Montgomery County and we do Arlington. But I did see in the report that was people fleeing domestic violence was a big part of the increase in Montgomery County, which is that's interesting. I don't know how that's like data driven. You know what I mean? I don't know why one region would see an increase in domestic violence versus another. That's not my specialty, but I do think it was interesting to note, like you said, that, yeah, people feeling domestic violence played a significant part in the increase in homelessness in the area.
Yeah. And I feel like there are just so many, especially in this area, so many factors that are going into this because, like you said, the, rising cost of housing is all of the Doge cuts that are getting rid of people's jobs. So not only are they living in this incredibly expensive area, but they no longer have the salaries that they had before, and the job market isn't exactly flourishing when it comes to all of these federal employees trying to scramble to find a new job.
Yeah, and there's kind of a knock-on effect from that too with Doge. Even if you weren't somebody that was directly Doge, that also means that your housing supply is going down further as people who maybe can't afford to live where they currently are now downgrading to some of those other places, and they might still be in a position to better afford that than other people who might need that. So that makes that lower end of housing even more competitive, which has that knock-on effect of driving up homelessness further.
Yeah, even as blue-collar jobs become more competitive as people are out of work and just looking for more work.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's tough. All right. Moving to something a little bit lighter. Arlington kicking off WorldPride with block party on Saturday.
This past Saturday, actually, was the block party.
Oh, yeah, we were out. You were out.
But yeah, there is a whole big slate of Pride events happening in Arlington, throughout June, but also it's May. I guess they're getting an early start this year because this is just, a huge, huge list of events happening here in Arlington. Yeah, there was a block party. There is a what is this, like a play that's being put on every week, something like that. There's just a whole bunch of arts and crafts, festivities, like a drag brunch, you know just no shortage of things to do here in Arlington, even as World Pride is technically happening across the river in DC.
Yeah, no, this is really exciting. There are, so many things popping up. I think this will also be great for local Arlington businesses too. It's, bringing in people that might not have originally had Arlington as their vacation destination.
Yeah, I talked to Freddy's Beach Bar not last week, but the week before. And that was one of the things we were chatting about this too, where, World Pride's going on across the river, but a lot of people are going to be staying in Arlington, and they might be just in their hotel on their phones looking up, hey, gay bar, and they're going to find Freddy's, which is right there. So even without doing any advertising, even if without officially hosting events, which they are hosting events, we're still going to see a dramatic increase over the next month, probably due to World Pride happening nearby.
Mm-hmm. I also feel like most people don't, if you're not from this area, you don't really draw a distinction between Arlington and DC. So, if you're here for World Pride, the events are happening within DC, but I don't think most people really look at it that way if you're just, here visiting.
Yeah, that's what one of the other Pride organizations I reached out to was saying, that they have a bunch of stuff set up to guide people who are in the area. And I think they specifically said, if you're coming over from Germany, you don't know that Arlington is, not part of DC, that's a completely separate thing. The same way that, if I was visiting Berlin, I might know which neighborhoods and which parts of town are technically part of what locality. So it all kind of blends together.
Yeah. No, I'm looking at a lot of these events, and some of them seem so, it feels like there's something for everybody. There's family pride. There was one that was 55 and up. There's themed bingo, 55 and up dance with pride, bracelet making for kids. This is everything. There's something for everybody. So I think this will be really exciting.
Yeah, I found it interesting to see just how many kid-friendly Pride events there are. I grew up in like suburban, kind of rural-ish Florida. Certainly there were some gay pride things where I was growing up, but like stuff geared towards kids in particular, I mean, you would have had just absolute uproar of that. But I mean, kids these days are wanting to express themselves and wanting to explore these kinds of aspects of their identity. And I thought it was cool to just see how many events here in Arlington are specifically geared toward that, although I might get angry calls from former friends for saying this.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Whenever people get mad about that around here, I'm like, sorry, like it's a thing. There's no point being
Yeah.
mad about it. It's also for like, again, pride is not explicitly sexual. Like, that's one of those things where it's not, there's no reason not to have kids events here. It's not like, it's
Yeah.
not children's hookup day. It's just talking about the history of pride the same way you talk about, like, Black History Month or Women's History Month. It's just, part of celebrating a local minority's culture.
And I mean, I love that they're family specific events because I feel like, you think of going to Pride in DC and it's like, oh, you're going to the gay bars, you're going to do all of these kind of more adult geared things. Whereas if you're a family, you're like, well, I want to do things on Saturday afternoon with the kids where they're going to have fun that isn't maybe centered around drinking, dancing, whatever that might be. So like bracelet making, especially, they're rainbows and stuff. So
Totally.
kids making fun, colorful. I think that's a great way to really include everybody. I think it's
Yeah,
awesome.
I think it is really important to bear in mind with these events that, like, yeah, Pride is not just like adults only. It's not like quote unquote adult in any way, or at least it doesn't have to be. I mean, I know we did have a controversy here in Arlington last year, I think, where there was like drag brunch for kids, and it was this drag queen coming and like blowing bubbles and reading stories to kids, and I think there was a huge for a very tiny handful of people, I think some real misconceptions about what drag inherently means.
It's
yeah.
It's kids looking at a person dressed up in a fun costume.
Have they ever gone to Disney and seen Elsa? That is someone dressed in a costume.
Yeah,
You know?
it's part of it's the cultural exploration. Again, there's nothing explicitly sexual about it. Also, the other fun part of this is when you have these family-friendly events, it means that you can have non-family friendly events without the fear of like having kids around there. So it's good.
Yeah.
It works both ways.
Yeah. When you said drag brunch for kids, my head went to, oh no, kids at brunch? I didn't even think of the drag part. I was like, oh, people are
Disgusting.
drinking at brunch. It's a lot of drinking. But no, other
Disgusting.
people
Those
can
children
also
are-
go to brunch and not do bottomless mimosas.
Yeah. We don't want our children exposed to French breadsticks at that age. It's unacceptable.
Oh my goodness.
You go to a lot of
Freedom
bottomless
breadsticks
brunches, Lena. Is that what you're telling
Every
us?
brunch I go to is bottomless brunch. What's the point of going to brunch if it's not all you can drink mimosas and espresso martinis?
Yeah.
I love
Some
that.
of the Pride events I'm going to are bottomless too, but there's no alcohol.
Those are the adult only ones.
Those are the adult only ones.
Just
Yeah.
so everyone's clear.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing, Vernon.
Oh my goodness. Well, I'm excited. I'm definitely going to add some of these to my calendar. But yeah, it's a lot of exciting things coming up. It was a lot of fun talking to you guys this week. I think we'll be back next week with a new bundle of stories.
Sounds good.
Sounds good. Talk to you guys then.
All right. See ya. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.